A necessary question for a necessary time.
Police department, search warrant! Police department, search warrant! What? Go! Police department, search warrant! Get down!
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion. And Andrew Finch. Who is he? Andrew Finch was the man who was shot dead by police on the night of the 28th December, responding to a false call in which the SWAT team were deployed. He was 28. He lived in Wichita, Kansas, and he had 2 children. What had provoked this call was a bunch of kids pissy over a Call of Duty game. One of the team threatened to swat the other said go on, and they did. However, the individual who encouraged themselves to be swatted provided the swatters with a false address, which is also not surprising. In fact, if anything, I'm surprised that the people who called the police were genuinely thick enough to think that someone would provide a legitimate address. But anyway, the team passed their information to the known swatter, Tyler Barris. As there are ways to conceal your identity in the case of swatting, they probably thought that by handing it over to someone a bit more discreet, they would outsmart this other team. But honestly, it's just beyond stupid. To make sure the SWAT team turned up, Barris, who also went by the Twitter account Swatistic, made the interaction as dramatic as possible, claimed that he had shot his father in the head and that he was holding his mother and brother hostage in the closet, all while having poured gasoline over the house.
My dad isn't breathing. It's kind of giving me anxiety, making me paranoid. Hello?
I'm still here. I'm still here, okay? Hello?
Complaints indicating, I'm sorry, I read the call, it's not correct. The complaint's advising he did shoot his dad in the head and he's not breathing. He's also indicating that his mom and brother are in the house and he has them at gunpoint.
Obviously, this wasn't the case. The police arrived and they apprehended Mr. Finch. And according to reports, when he didn't fully comply with the police requests, one officer shot him and he was pronounced dead following transportation to the local hospital. Swatting is not new, but this story sticks out because of its tragic outcome. One innocent man killed because a bunch of kids were salty over a game with a $1.50 wager. With severe outcomes come severe consequences, and as soon as the outcomes were learned, every individual involved was looking to point the finger. The SWAT of the game as law enforcement scrambling for justification or information that could lead to a clearer picture. But things are never that simple. Who is to blame? There's a song called Who Killed Russell Jones by Dolan B, a spoken word piece where he discusses the people who could have contributed to the premature demise of Old Dirty Bastard from a first person perspective, defending their actions as merely participating in the culture. I want you to hold this thought while we take a trip into the current culture that preceded this tragedy. Swatting is not a rare event. It has been a thing for years now. As Keemstar himself said, the first time he was ever swatted was in 2010, and he was hardly a big fish back then. Plenty of famous streamers and gamers have been the victims of swatting, and in fact many would argue that it's a risk you now have to anticipate if you want to participate in the industry. Once again, a majority of people realize it's a scummy thing to do, but think, well, it doesn't have any particular long-term consequences, it's a dick thing to do, but they're probably just dicks anyway, so let's do it. The gamers were just passionate, and passionate people do stupid things. It was a one-off. They couldn't anticipate the extreme nature of the SWAT call, nor could they have thought in their wildest dreams that it would lead to someone being shot and killed. They were naive, but not murderers. Then you have the swatter Tyler Barris who made the call. Some say that the call was particularly awful, but I highly doubt it was anything exceptional for Barris, who puts in an Oscar-worthy performance of a psychotic child in a man's body, prompting the release of the unit. Once again, he basically said he was involved but not solely accountable. How could he anticipate such consequences? He's been doing it forever and nothing ever happened. In his Twitter, he claimed he didn't kill anyone because he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger.
Unfucking believable.
So who was the person who pulled the trigger? Well, the SWAT officer, who is currently on paid leave. From what we understand, when Andrew Finch the father didn't raise both hands in accordance, this officer in question misinterpreted this as a reach for the weapons and shot Mr. Finch. Now, it's important to remember that just because one wrong has been committed doesn't mean that the officer is completely vindicated. He could have still acted rashly or against how they are coordinated too. And although the call made by Barris was definitely severe, they always have an obligation to not let their conduct be affected by such factors. As As the officers are always permitted to shoot with reasonable proof of threat, they'll have to carry out a separate investigation, and I hope it will be done thoroughly and honestly, in spite of the fact that my faith in authority is always fairly low. But obviously the officer wouldn't have been there if there hadn't been a hoax SWAT call put in the first place, which was ridiculously exaggerated. Officers are not expected to let circumstances influence them, but they are human beings, and it sometimes happens. We live in a world of probabilities. 99.9% of SWAT calls may not end in casualties. But for each factor that plays in, the illegitimate SWAT call, the false address, the itchy trigger finger, the victim who doesn't quite cooperate with the request, one time, these will all align and something goes wrong. You have a group of heavily armed individuals responding to a call about someone who is believed to be extremely dangerous. It's an outcome that has to be acknowledged, and every now and then it will be realized. SWAT teams are very professional, and once again, that officer's conduct will be judged on an independent basis, but the fact that they're very professional and don't often kill civilians doesn't give you any right to do it. And if you say, well, most things entail risks, that shouldn't deter people from doing them, you miss the point. It's a cost-benefit analysis, and there is no benefit other than shits and giggles for juvenile man children. It wastes police time, resources, and causes unnecessary emotional stress for many people, and I hope you understand those consequences now. For those who made it this far, I want to call back on the story of B. Dolan, of who killed Russell Jones. On the pragmatic basis, it was drugs, cocaine and tramadol. But as Dolan eloquently unravels, what really killed him was the toxic culture that had leaned towards glorifying destructive behavior for vacuous fulfillment. For Andrew Finch, from the stands, it was a bullet that killed him. But what really killed him was a plague that should have been stamped out while many had the chance to. For you and I and many gamers, the idea of swatting is deeply troubling. But there are clearly some people who believe that because they're not the SWAT team, because they're not the ones holding the weapons, they cannot be responsible for the consequences that befall many innocent citizens. Hopefully some of these people will wake up from their fantasies and realize that their actions do have consequences, no matter how intimate they may be at the time. These things will catch up to you. So, who killed Andrew Finch? I would be interested to hear down below who you think bears the responsibility and what should really be done to make sure this doesn't happen again. Until then, I'm the right opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.
Who killed Russell Jones? Why and was the reason known? Not us, said the managers and record execs who treated each arrest like nothing but free press, make $1 million off the mess and cut